Hello, Watch Forest Focus. There's another one of those massive City ground games on the horizon as Nottingham Forest take on Wolves on Saturday. Is it the weekend when the Reds put one foot in next season's Premier League, or will they slide a step closer to the Championship? Joining me to discuss all that, first of all, is Reds fan Pete Blackburn. Pete, you've been away for a week or two. Are you well?
Yeah, very good. Thanks. Nice to be back. A week away has made me sort of realise how much I enjoyed doing this. So it's great to be back involved.
Oh, well, good. Good to hear it and good to have you back. And with us for the first 15 minutes, hence why we're actually starting on time, is Michael Temple. Temps, how you doing?
I feel the opposite to Pete, really. I'm over it. I'm seeing you again tonight. If anything, I'm getting a bit too much of you.
It's true, yes. Live show tonight. Temps is on the panel. Pete's there getting drunk and shouting obscenities from the sides, no doubt. So hopefully see lots of people there. There is a link if you want to get tickets still in the description. There's a few remaining. So yes, good to have everyone with us. Temps, kick us off. Just a few thoughts on the game and probably around the age-old question of it, is it must win?
I think so. I mean, in my kind of predictions for the rest of the season, I've got us getting something in the region of 6 to 9 points from this position. And in all of those scenarios, I've got us beating Wolves. The Man City and Chelsea games are tough. Obviously, there'll be a lot of pressure when we travel to Sheffield United and Burnley, and Everton are in the middle of that as well. So I don't know, I'm just bottling the energy from the Fulham game. I think that was the most complete 45 minutes of football we've put together all season. And I think it will be being drilled into the players, certainly not lost on the supporters, how important this game is. So, yeah, I'm confident we can beat Wolves. I think we need to alleviate some pressure, because I'm looking at the Luton run. So they're going to have Man City this weekend, which you wouldn't expect them to get too much from. But then they have their little spell. They play Brentford, Wolves, Everton after that, and that's moving time for them. So 3 points required. I wouldn't say it's must win in the sense that whatever happens, I think we're going to end the day outside of the relegation zone, because Man City should turn over Luton. But in my roadmap to safety, we beat Wolves.
I think, Pete, for me, the reason why it's so big this weekend is probably the other fixtures, because City have got Luton and Everton have got Chelsea on Monday night. So they'll know the results by then. And then we go to Everton. It feels like if we can win, and it's obviously such a big if, as we'll get into, then it really does put us in the driving seat with the goal difference we've got on Luton, which you'd expect will take a dent to some degree this weekend. Well, how are you feeling about it?
Yeah, I'm pretty much with you guys, although I'm sort of loath to put too much pressure on it, because I think the truth is that the games left will throw up some surprises for us and for other teams. And it never really goes quite as your sort of escape map plays out in your head, does it? So I'm hopeful that it won't necessarily be the end of the world if we lose, or if we only get a point from the game. But I'm very optimistic about it. I think we can go and get it. As Temp said, I think we've got the blueprint now. That Fulham first half was unbelievable. I can't remember the last time that I felt that way watching Forest play football, to be honest. It was absolutely magnificent. And I think, Matt, you can probably attest to that, given that I was messaging you for about 5 hours through the night when I should have been going to sleep for my flight to Lanzarote. But yeah, no, I don't get involved in any of this must-win stuff, because anything can happen, and 6 games is still a long time. I imagine there's going to be more ups and downs. You only have to look at the last week that we've been through to see that. We were all as high as kites after Fulham, and then down in the depths after Spurs. But there will be lots of ups and downs still to come. But like I say, I think we've got the blueprint. I'm pretty optimistic about it. I don't think it's a perfect moment for Wolves. I think we have to go into it with real intent right from the off, just like we did against Fulham. And hopefully we can get early goals, take the confidence from there, and see another game out. And I mean, that would make a massive difference to our season, because I think the confidence would be huge. The momentum, as you talk about, would be huge because of those other games and how it's likely to play out. So fingers crossed.
Laura Mitchell, the insightful person in the Mitchell household, makes a good point about how bad we are away from home and the extra implications of this game, with our other home games being Man City at home and Chelsea at home, which I think we can win. But City at home, anything we get is kind of bonus point territory. And thank you very much to Mark Williams for becoming a member. Appreciate the support, Mark. One thing I've done already, Temps, is speak to the opposition Wolves fan, Ryan Lester, lovely guy. And he says Wolves will do kind of the opposite to what Fulham did and leave no space in behind, make it very difficult, make it scrappy, as we've seen with these games between Wolves and Forest. I don't think that suits us at all, breaking teams down. How do you feel about the way we need to try and approach this game if we can?
I'm just really interested to see who scores first, obviously, because they've conceded at least 2 goals in 3 of the last 4, and we're 13 games without a clean sheet now. So both teams to score feels like a good bet. First goal is important, and your game plan goes out of the window if you find yourselves behind. You can't camp with 2 banks of 4 against a team from outside the upper echelons of the Premier League if you find yourself needing to score. So if it starts off as a chess match and we find them deep and compact, that will change the moment the first goal goes in. I think they're frustrated at the minute, threw away that lead at West Ham. Like us, they've had fits and starts, periods where they've looked like they would ease well clear of any danger, take some big scalps, and other days where they've struggled. Still wound up by those games last year when I think we first started our campaign against Premier League referees in those 2-1-alls. So yeah, first goal is massive. I think it's a both teams score kind of day. Feels like a game that could be settled by a mistake. What do we do if they're deep and compact? I think we've still got to use the width. I think we've still got to get Hudson-Odoi running at a full back, maybe get Alanga's pace, get him on the ball in the middle third, get him running at defenders rather than trying to clip balls or play those through balls. Just got to adapt our weapons and use them wisely. And let's not forget, we've got one of the informed strikers in the Premier League in Chris Wood, who I'd be selecting over Taiwo on form at the minute if they were both fit. So lots of reasons to be optimistic, but 2 defences that have been leaking goals, and I think we have to score first if we're going to get the 3 points.
What do you make of Wolves as an opponent, Pete? I had them down to, well, I think I put them down to get relegated at the start of the season. When they'd sold Neves, the manager had gone the week before the season. A lot of people on down to struggle. They've done really well, but they're struggling with injuries. I think Craig Dawson might miss this one. He's borderline. Cunha's not fully fit and been on the bench. Wang Yi-chan's missed out. And Ryan Yates, who's really, really good, frankly, went off in the last game. So, as Temp said, their form isn't great. And they lost in the FA Cup to Coventry in brutal circumstances. But I still think they're a really good side. How are you feeling about them as an opponent?
Well, I think I guess it's interesting how fans of clubs feel about their own teams, because the Wolves fans obviously sort of downplaying things somewhat and thinking about a very cagey game and probably not feeling great because of the form and the injuries that you list. I look at their team, even what's still available, and the way they've gone about things this season. I wouldn't describe it as intimidation, but there's a sort of bit of admiration about the way they've done things, and there are parts of their team that I think are really impressive. I mean, that centre mid pairing, which has come from nowhere basically after years of Moutinho and Neves playing together and just being absolute ever presence, is like remarkably good. I think even at Premier League level, it's a seriously good pairing with pretty much all the attributes you want. I think they've got the gritty and clever ability to steal the ball, and the way that they control possession is brilliant as well, and they can spring counters really quickly. And if they get the ball to those attacking players, then Wolves can be a real threat because they've got good players up there. I mean, as you say, they're missing some names, but Cunha back is a threat even if he's not at his best. He's been like relentlessly pretty good this year, I think. And I think Sarabia as well is a really classy operator when he plays, which I guess he's likely to given the situation they've got elsewhere. So yeah, I mean, I look at them and see lots of things to be thinking about as a Forest manager, I guess, and trying to cope with. But I totally agree with Temps. Really, I think I'm not desperately concerned about this idea that they're going to sit in deep and we won't be able to break them down. That first half against Fulham, that isn't just the sort of counter-attacking football that we saw under Cooper and early Nuno. I don't think it was interplay in their half that was absolutely brutal. The way that Gibbs-White and Hudson-Odoi and Alanga linked up, Wood showing up as well. I think we can do that in front of their defence as well if we need to, and still unlock and find room in behind and pick the pass. Some of that stuff was happening in much closer areas to their box than it has been in the past with Forest as a Premier League team. You know, it wasn't just sort of Brennan Johnson running onto incredibly long balls through behind and such like. So I think we've shown that we can do it, and I think there are probably tweaks that we can make to the team further as well. I mean, I think the team is still crying out for a Dominguez in games like this where he can probably win the ball and do more of it more quickly. I'm a massive Ryan Yates fan, as people will generally know, but I think he would give us a huge another aspect to our game. Yates's first ambition is usually to sort of keep the ball and keep things ticking, in a slightly less ambitious sense, I guess. But I think Dominguez might be able to get us up the pitch much more quickly. And I think he can pick a pass. He can also get in the box and assist and score as well. So I think we've got plenty of attributes to hurt them. And what I saw from us against Fulham, I think would hurt any team. I don't think that's just the case of hurting a team that comes out to play.
Let's go to Pete's lineup, but then I'll flip things around and get Temps' thoughts because he's only here for a couple more minutes before we have to let him go. So this is Pete's team. I'll read it out for those listening, not watching as ever. Sells in goal, same back four as at Tottenham. Williams, Omobamidele, Murillo, Ola Aina, left back, and then Danilo partnering with Dominguez in the one change. Elanga, Gibbs-White, Hudson-Odoi, and Chris Wood. So I will let you talk through it shortly, Pete, but just before Temps goes, would that be your team, Temps, or would you go unchanged from the last two? What do you think?
I think he's picking Yatesy. I accept Pete's point completely about him being more technical, having another dimension to him, but is he as disciplined at screening a relatively young back four and just being that defensive linchpin of the team? So whilst that maybe is the team I would pick, I can't help but think that Nuno's going to plump for Yatesy. I think so much hangs on Morgan Gibbs-White. We saw him iced up after the Tottenham game, which I have no reason to think is anything other than precautionary and the usual kind of recovery method after a Premier League game. It was a minor concern. He was first to be dragged when Dominguez did come on. So notwithstanding any kind of injury or knock to Morgan Gibbs-White, I would expect to see the same side that we saw lose at Spurs, the same side that we saw tear Fulham apart. But yeah, there's a case for Dominguez. He's definitely ahead of Sangare in my book, and I think the centre halves now inked in, which were the major selection discussions that we had 2 weeks ago. So yeah, that is the one to debate. I see Dominguez's qualities. I can't help but think that Nuno will stick with Yatesy.
Any final thoughts, Temps, before we let you go? Because I know you've got to go. Anything you want to add?
Just the Morgan Gibbs-White motivation thing. Yeah, I think Lee made a point in the comments about seeing Morgan's celebration against Wolves. I think that'd be a sweet thing. They knew what they had. They just couldn't get him in the side. They got a £30 million transfer fee for him, so he served them well in that sense after a year on loan to a Championship club. So feels like a bit of a headline writer's dream if it was Morgan Gibbs-White to have the decisive moment in this game. So that's what I'm going to leave you with. He's going to be pivotal. He's going to be man of the match again. And if Morgan Gibbs-White's man of the match, it's a game that Forest will win.
Excellent. Temps, we shall let you go and see you this evening. Thank you very much. Right, Temps has departed us. I'll put the team back up, Pete. There are a few individuals that I want to go back to, like Morgan and like Ryan Yates, but just general thoughts on that. No temptation to make a change at the back. No temptation to play Rayner or anyone else. I don't know, but was it pretty easy for you apart from that midfield battle?
Yeah, it was, to be honest. I think Temps touched on it. The only other area that we've been debating a great deal in recent weeks is the centre half position, isn't it? And it's also sort of plays into why I'm happy to let Yates go for this one. Is that I think if you look at the sort of profile of the Wolves team, they're really not a significant aerial threat, and I really hope that doesn't come back to bite me now saying something like that. But no, I mean, generally speaking, they're not. And one of the reasons why I feel like we have to have Yates in the squad so often is because he is that. I mean, if you look at his stats, they're pretty significant in that regard, and that's not a strength that we have elsewhere in the team, really, particularly in those centre back roles. But I mean, Omobamidele has done generally brilliantly, I think, since he's been in the team. And you'll get desperately bored of me saying this, but when we have young footballers that we've paid a decent bit of money for, I'm really keen for us to invest in them with playing time and to develop them, because I think that has to be what we are as a football club. So I see no argument to make a change there, to be honest. I guess the options are whether you bring a sort of Felipe experienced head in, or there's Niakate as well. But I just don't see that either of them has made a particularly clear argument for that role, to be honest. And yeah, I totally take Temps' point about Yates. I think he's likely to play, and I won't have an issue with it if he does. I think he's been generally really good for us. But I just do see an opportunity in this game for us to really set the tone with our team selection. And I think we sort of did that against Fulham. You saw the sort of spark from the very beginning. And I think we could even be maybe slightly braver in this game and really take it to them. I think Dominguez has a lot of the attributes that Yates has in terms of nicking the ball. I think he's very good at stealing the ball from the opposition. But the difference is that he can turn it into something that might be meaningful in a very quick way. And I think that could be crucial in this game because, as your Wolves fan has said, they're going to be much more difficult to break down. And I think we're going to need all the craft that we can get. I think Dominguez really gives that. So that's why I plumped for it, and I don't feel like we need the sort of Yates aerial protection quite so much. So those were my only real sort of thought processes when doing it. I mean, I think lots of players in that team are going to be crucial. What we're seeing from Hudson-Odoi now, the craft that he can bring, and he does that without that sort of searing pace, but he does it with quick movement, the way that he shifts the ball, interplay with other players, and I think he'll probably be pretty crucial. And I think the fullbacks are going to have an enormous role in this one. I mean, you mentioned Aït-Nouri. I hope he's not fit because he can be pretty devastating. But if he is, Nico's going to have a big job. And a lot of their attacking play comes from out wide, particularly given the setup that they have with wing backs and the sort of wider forwards. So I think they're both going to be busy boys, but they've shown since they've been in the team as that fullback pairing that they can really give us a lot, I think. So it's a team I'd be pretty confident about, and I'd also feel like it was a real statement of intent from Nuno, and that's what I want to see from him. I think when we've been at our best, that's what he's done. You know, those early games, we were surprised by that team. We hadn't seen Gibbs-White playing as a 10. There were attacking options in there. We hadn't seen Danilo playing in a deep role. It felt like he was really taking games by the scruff of the neck and taking it to teams in better positions in the table than us. I think we saw that against Fulham, and the impact was pretty clear. And I may be drawing sort of correlation lines where there aren't any, but I think that it does play a part in things. So I'd love to see it, but equally I wouldn't be concerned if Yates was in the team, and I can totally understand why, as a manager with the actual responsibility, you might want a little bit more of that stability in there.
I was just looking while you were talking I saw an Aït-Nouri touch map from the weekend on Twitter. I couldn't find it. But yeah, he's ridiculous the way he's positioned, because he's not a left back or a left wing back. He's playing really high, but also drifting across the front line, playing as a 10. So I think they might have to double up on him and let Nico pass him on to probably Dominguez or Danilo. I think that's a really key battle. And we'll come on to another couple of key battles. But just before that, a quick word for the Trent Navigation. As ever, if you go into the game on Saturday, they've got a bigger, improved open outdoor space, as you can see from the photo if you're watching, not the one on Mikey, the one below it, with a new match day host in Simon Fotheringham, who I'm sure is familiar to Reds fans. So yeah, the best place to go pre-match for Forest games, and then post-match it is the Oasis gig, as I've been plugging for a while. 5:30 p.m. start. So if you leave the City Ground and head straight to Trent Navigation, a good night is promised, I'm sure. I want to just pick up on Ryan Yates a little bit. Like I would pick Dominguez personally, but Yates was really good against Fulham. So if he picks him with Danilo again, that's fine. I do want to see some continuity in the team. I think just the kind of never-ending Ryan Yates debate that you see, like after Fulham he was okay, and then as soon as he has a bad 20 minutes against Spurs, he's a disgrace and shouldn't play again. I mean, how good or bad is he as a Premier League player, do you think, in as being as neutral as we can be?
Well, am I here to be neutral? I've got my biases. I mean, Ryan Yates is one of them. Look, I'm not part of that debate whatsoever. I think Ryan Yates is an absolutely crucial part of our Premier League squad. Me not picking him in this team is no reflection on that whatsoever. It's not a reaction to his first performance. I actually think there's been an overreaction to that in some senses. Look, I think Ryan Yates has shown time and time again that you stick a challenge up in front of him and he climbs it and absolutely smashes it down. You know, either runs through the brick wall or he climbs over it. I don't understand why he gets so much hate. I think people see a footballer who perhaps doesn't do some of the things that their favourite players do on Match of the Day or whatever, He doesn't have the sort of technical skill where he's going to score worldies or he's necessarily going to be threading passes through the eye of a needle. But it's just, this is a cliched argument that is heavily trotted out, but it's true. There's a reason why Ryan Yates is always in Forest squads and always in Forest teams. It's because he brings things to those teams. And look, part of that is because Forest teams generally, in the time that Yates has been at the club, have been struggling and have needed a player like him to hold things together, because he brings leadership. He brings an absolutely relentless desire and energy on the pitch. And I mean, to me, it's insane and it's absolutely bizarre that any Forest fan would have an issue with Ryan Yates, because when he goes out on that pitch, he dies for the shirt like any of us would feel like we'd want to, but he does it with an awful lot more ability than most of us could have done. I'm very firmly in the Ryan Yates fan club, but I don't think necessarily that he should always be in the team. I think there's an element of horses for courses for selection, and also Forest are becoming a more ambitious side and will be moving on from players of a certain quality and moving on to players of another quality. But you see with the signing of Sangare recently, and also with the signing of players like Domingos, who haven't necessarily settled with pure consistency, that you don't necessarily just pay for a player and get an upgrade. Ryan Yates brings a stability to this football club, and when he's in the team, he does have a positive impact. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Personally, I don't understand why he gets the sort of criticism that he does. I think it's probably just that often as people, we need someone to have a little moan about, and he's a bit of an easy target, I think. But for me, he's nowhere on the list of scapegoats if you want to find some when it comes to Forest struggling in the Premier League. I could offer you up a long list before I'd even be thinking about Ryan Yates. I think it's an absolute privilege to have him in the football club representing us as fans, and I hope that he's still here next season if we're in the Premier League again. But as I say, I think there's a good chance that we'll be looking for bigger and better next season, and he might become a slightly smaller part in the squad. But that's absolutely fine as well.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that take. Just before I address that, Matt asks if he's banned with 5 bookings. It's 10 now, Matt, I think. Well, I know you have to get 10 bookings by game week 33, I think, which is this one. So, no, he's fine. No danger of suspension there. It is funny he's only got 5 bookings. I know people are saying he should have got a lot more, but he's just really good at managing refs, I think, is the one reason. And he doesn't clatter into people generally. He gives them niggly fouls. He just gave too many away at Spurs and was rightly booked after 15 minutes. But for me, he wouldn't start every game, but he would start some, and he brings massive value to the squad. I remember Steve Cook being on, well, I say here, on our former guys, saying about the value of people like Ryan Yates in the dressing room or on the pitch. And we don't want to move away from that too quickly, I think. I think Pete's right. If we evolve as the owner wants to and we want to as fans, then in time, Ryan Yates will become more and more of a bit part player. But right now, where we are, I still think he's got a big role to play where these games are do or die. And I think you probably need do or die players, which means, Pete, for me, I don't think you can play Sangare or start him in this one, and potentially even no games before the end of the season unless we see some good cameos off the bench. Would you be in that camp as well? And then we could kind of review him in the summer, do you think?
Yeah, my view on Sangare is sort of fairly solid, and I've no interest in sort of initiating another pile-on, because I think we've been there in the past, and people love to. He's another player that people love to throw a stick at, and I guess that's probably mainly because of the price tag, and also perhaps because there's this perception of him being sort of slightly languid footballer. My situation with Sangare is that he's a player that I really wanted us to sign. I thought he was going to be transformative. But the truth is that it doesn't always work out like that, and it doesn't always work out quickly. And it may be the case that he needs more time and a second season, a pre-season, and a season next season, which, if we're in the Premier League, will be less interrupted, because obviously there was AFCON. He's had niggly injuries as well. He's never really had the sort of run in the team that you would like, I guess, if you were him, to really settle into things. And then to be doing all of that while Forest are struggling under the threat of relegation, and then points deductions looming and all that sort of stuff. I mean, this is not a stable environment to be welcoming a new player into. And I think we have to bear all that stuff in mind when we think about people. we're often very quick to write people off, and I think we've learned lessons with a few of our players this season that perhaps we should just give them a little bit more time and see how it goes. So on Sangare, for me, he's unlikely to be getting in a starting lineup for the rest of the season. I can't say I particularly considered him when you asked me to pick one for this game. I think he's got a role as an impact sub, and hopefully that will sit less heavily if there are sort of confidence issues there. I'm just purely speculating, and I probably shouldn't really because I don't know what's going on with him, whether it's just an issue of poor form or whether it's hard moving to a new country and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, my situation with him is that I hope that we will be able to spur a sort of a new Sangare on through pre-season next season, because ultimately it's going to be hard to get rid of him. In the era of PSR, you can't sign players for £35 million if you're Nottingham Forest and then move them on for 15, because that's a big problem with your accounting. So I think we're probably going to likely need him in the squad unless we can find a loan move that suits and doesn't hurt us financially. So in the meantime, let's see if we can use him as a sub when there are moments to see games out, or perhaps add a bit of strength to the middle of the park, and hopefully he can find a little bit of form in those moments without perhaps the pressure of being called upon to start in such important, crucial games. And perhaps that can be a sort of steady route to improvement. But there's no reason to be writing off players after one sort of interrupted, messy, chaotic season. I mean, you don't need to think about what we've been through this season for long to see what a sort of mad mess it's been. Loads more recruitment, lots of players off for AFCON, absolutely enormous injury lists, which thankfully are a bit in the past now. All those things. We need to become a slightly more stable club because we've been in flux for a long time. And I don't think it's an environment for players to thrive. And I hope that we can be a bit more of that next season, and hopefully that'll benefit Sangare.
I think he's only played 15 games or something like that. I need to look it up again. But yeah, I agree. I think I'd really want to see him after a full pre-season and have a run of games at the start of next season. And that's probably when we make more of a decision on him. The Dutch League and the Premier League are worlds apart, and the pace of the Premier League. I think he struggled with the pace of the Premier League, like the way he's moved the ball. Physically being so languid doesn't help him. It casts a perception that he doesn't care, when I just can't believe that any Premier League player doesn't care. Even if he's not particularly enjoying his time at Forest and wants to move, well, he's got to give his best to get one. So, I'd like to see a lot more of him. I think Dan points out in the comments he's only played 90 minutes 5 times. It's tough to judge a player over that. And before he went to AFCON, he was playing well. Sorry, I just dropped something. He was playing well at Newcastle, I recall. It was just that Crystal Palace game where he had 15 minutes, which has really cast him in a negative light. And Fulham away as well was another one. But yeah, I would like to see a lot more of him.
I think you're bang on. And also Laura Mitchell's making some great points about the difficulties of coming to a new place and such like in the comments. I think you're absolutely right. But, we've forgiven other players for the Fulham performance, haven't we? I mean, if I remember correctly, I was absolutely horrified by Ole Einar that night, and I'm waxing lyrical about him now. Well, that might be a bit strong, but very positive about his role and the impact he's had in recent games. So I think there are lessons to learn for us as fans, aren't there? We are very reactive, and I think we're all guilty of that because a game happens and it just means an awful lot to us, and especially when you're there and in the thick of it and the emotions are riding high. But we have to remember that footballers are people. They're living in environments which impact their ability to perform, and also we haven't got a clue what they're going through most of the time. And we're all very happy to watch documentaries about our favourite celebrities revealing their various crises and stuff after the event. But if we're slagging them off along the way, it's not particularly helpful, is it? So look, I'm just hopeful that we can be all a little bit less reactive, support the players like we do at our absolute best, and hopefully there's plenty of time for him to come good.
Laura's referencing Malin at Dortmund. That's far too hipster Euro football for me, Laura. I don't know who that is, to be honest, but I'll take your word for it.
He was another that moved from Holland, a young striker, Daniel Mullen, yeah. And I think it's just like you say, it's a big old move from that league where I think there's an awful lot of very talented players, but you've seen, if you look at Premier League history, that very often doesn't work out, and it's a big old. I think you make a great point about it being a big old leap in terms of the sort of athleticism and the pace of it. I think you really do see that with Sangare. It's sort of like he knows what he wants to do, but he just can't quite achieve it in the time that he's got, and I think that is something that can change.
Yeah, let's review Sangare in the summer then and see how he gets on. I mean, obviously, if we're not in the Premier League, then he's going to go somewhere, even if it's on loan like Leeds have done. But yeah, conversation for a different day. One thing specifically about this game I want to talk about, Pete, was obviously Gibbs-White and, the rivalry around Wolves and that. But more specifically, we saw Gibbs-White versus Polinia was a very one-sided battle, which way more one-sided than I expected against Fulham. Again, referencing what Ryan, the Wolves fan, said, he referenced about João Gomez and how good he's been, and you were noticing that earlier. I think he might go in the summer. It's like Man United have been sniffing around. He's number 6. I feel like that's a really crucial area of the pitch. If Morgan can get the better of him, and then we can open Wolves up, as you were saying, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm going to be a bit hyperbolic about Morgan. I think I'd actually had a bit of a chat with some of my mates at the pub before the Fulham game, and I was saying we need to see a bit more output from him. His numbers aren't great, and I get that he's often sort of let down by players around him just not being quite to the level that he is in terms of sort of providing chances for Elanga or whatever. But we just need to see a bit more of him. We need to see him really dominate games if he's going to play in that 10 role. And my God, did he answer all those questions? I'm an absolutely huge fan of his. But, even I would have been concerned that he was going to be in the pocket of Polinia for a game like that, because he's just, he seems like such a strong player in that role. And I think myself and some of my friends are talking about, maybe is this a game to play Gibbs-White a bit deeper, so you sort of move away from Polinia? And I mean, that just seems absolutely mad in hindsight now. So I think, I just absolutely back him to go and do a job against anyone. I'm honestly not desperately concerned who is in that number 6 role against him, because I think if Gibbs-White's at his best, he can perform against anyone in the world. But no, I agree. Gomez has been fantastic, and I mean, in the tackle, he's extraordinary. I don't think I've seen anyone in the Premier League better, to be honest. So Gibbs-White will have to be careful, and I think with Morgan, when he's really on his game, he does things so precisely and so quickly. You see the way his little Cruyff turns and those outside of the ball passes, but it's just those little turns that sometimes get him into a little bit of trouble. And when he's not at his absolute best, a player like Gomez will just steamroller him and take the ball, and we'll be in trouble if that's the way. But if he's like he was against Fulham, then I'm not remotely concerned who he's up against, because I think he can hurt anyone.
One other bit of team news to discuss. Obviously, Nuno's going to do his press, I would imagine, in a few hours. So we're talking about stuff that we know. A report yesterday in the Telegraph that Tavares is getting closer, which is good. And crucially, Taiwo might potentially be in the squad for this game, if not soon, if he's going to have a scan on his thigh injury. Attempts touched on it earlier, the question I was going to say, Pete, but I don't think he's going to start many games this season, but the power of Taiwo off the bench could be really crucial if he can come on and get a couple of goals. We saw Origi didn't really do much against Spurs with very limited service, but the boost of Taiwo as a bench option could be pivotal, actually, couldn't it, in the relegation fight?
I think it could be monumental. We're obviously in a different phase of the season now to the last time that he was coming back from that injury a few months ago, and we were sort of willing him into the starting lineup and desperate for him to play, particularly because Wood was injured as well at the time, I think. I think it's unlikely, as you say, that he's going to be coming back and starting games at this point. I mean, I wouldn't be unhappy if he was, because presumably he'd be fit and firing. But I think Wood's earned the spot, and it would be an absolute boon for Forest to have a Taiwo on the bench who can come on and give you a big 20, 25 minutes. I mean, I don't think I could imagine much more of a nightmare for a centre-back who's been marshalling a red-hot Chris Wood for however long during the game, to see Taiwo warming up and coming on, because he is an absolute pain to play against. Even when he's not looking at his best, which he hasn't for pretty much the whole season, he is brutal to defenders. His strength is extraordinary. I mean, he's got a pretty tidy touch, and also, I mean, suddenly he can get in behind you as well, and he's mobile enough to spin you and go in behind. I just think it would be a horror show for for me as a centre back, seeing him coming on to 70 minutes when I'm already knackered. And I think that would make a big difference to Forest because we just haven't got that at the moment. As you said, I mean, Origi, I've got no interest in criticising Origi because I think he's sort of done fine when he's been in the team. Generally, he's not really made any howlers or anything. He's made something decent of most of his chances, if not managing to put them away. I mean, he had the potential to be getting quite a few assists actually, but others have spurned chances, which might have made his record look a little bit more favourable when he was playing out wide. But him coming on against Spurs, it was like the life just went out of the team with those changes. There was just no threat anymore, and I think Spurs were just sort of able to relax into it. Then, but the difference if we'd have been able to bring Taiwo on against Spurs, I think they would have been absolutely terrified, and I wouldn't have been remotely surprised if we'd have nicked one, and then anything could have happened, as I think you guys were saying on the pod, because they were fragile as anything, I think. So yeah, I think it would make a massive difference. I think the one big gripe myself and a lot of people have with Nuno is about the way he handles the bench. And some of that may not be his fault because it's just what he's got there. But I think he would, in theory, I would like him to use probably Reina and certainly Dominguez in a slightly more proactive way. And if you had Taiwo there as well, I think you've got the potential for a bench that can be transformative in the moments where you really need it to.
Yeah, very true. I think my gripe with Origi is probably just missing big chances, really. I think, there's been 3 or 4 where you think you really should have scored there, and that can make a difference. Even the Spurs one at the weekend, it was too late in the game probably, but that was another one. One last point on the game I was going to make is around, you were talking about player Taiwo coming off the bench. I've become a bit obsessed with this chart that I've put up twice this week now. If we look at 15-minute brackets where teams have scored their goals, Wolves' most dangerous period is 61 to 75 minutes, which is kind of the time when subs start coming on. And if they do have Cunha on the bench, he played 30 minutes at the weekend, Wang Yi-Chan on the bench, they're good options coming off. So I think Forest are going to have to be pretty switched on around then, because Wolves generally, they have struggled late in games and start of second half. And once you start introducing subs, they do look quite dangerous. So, yeah, I do like that chart, I must admit.
There's a lot of red on ours. I presume that's not good.
Punditry. No, we haven't got any bit of green. We haven't outscored anyone in any phase of the game, unfortunately.
Yeah, the green at the top looks nicer, doesn't it? I prefer that.
Yeah. Oh, who have we got next? Everton. I'm just have a quick look at Everton. They're pretty steady as well. Yeah.
This is great for the people who are listening, isn't it?
I know. Sorry to those who are listening on iTunes, Spotify, and other platforms. We'll move on from that. Right. Any final thoughts on the game, or shall we just move on to any other business?
Any more thoughts on the game?
I'm going to ask you one. Sorry, I did forget about the rivalry between the teams and the Morgan Gibbs-White factor. It's all a bit false in a sense. There's no genuine hatred between the teams, but I do think it adds a bit of a zip to the atmosphere in the ground. And if it gets a bit feisty, I think that might favour Forest a little bit. Any thoughts on that, and any other general thoughts on the game?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to have to be honest here because there are people who sit with me at games who will out me if I'm not, and I don't. That's not a way to be, is it? I mean, I think you asked me about this when I was on for a game against, I think it was Brentford, and there was a bit of a sort of confected rivalry going on or something.
I don't care.
And I basically said, "Shut up! Don't ask me that." It was very rude, and I felt very bad about it. But no, the truth is that I might like to think that I'm above such things, but actually, I must admit, Wolves have, as a football club and a fan base, got a little bit under my skin since the interactions over the Morgan Gibbs-White transfer. I think partly because I'd sort of adopted him as a Forest player pretty much from the moment we beat Huddersfield in the final. I knew that he was a player that Steve Cooper wanted to build his sort of Forest project around. And from what I gathered about the feeling in the club, they were going to sort of go out to get it all done, which obviously played out in the end after a long old protracted saga. So I'd really sort of taken him to heart. And then you shouldn't base anything off what people say on Twitter, really. But, the Wolves fans' behaviour towards him was pretty abominable in many cases. I don't like the way that they treat him at games. I just don't really get why you would ever behave like that to someone who's come through your club, and I presumably would have been absolutely delighted to be in the first team and getting more opportunities and all that sort of stuff. And I love Morgan Gibbs-White, and I think he's the absolute heartbeat of our team, and I will not stand for anyone who's slagging him off. So, yeah, Wolves, they really do get on my under my skin. And, yeah, a couple of my best pals reminded me before the Fulham game that I might like to think I'm a sort of calm chap, but last time Wolves came to the City Ground, I was a total wildling in the stands, apparently. So I can't hide from this one, and I have to admit the faux rivalry has got me a little bit.
Yes, TC's point out in the comments what I was going to say about the abuses. I'm not sure if they're married or not, but his partner got as well on social media, just from Wolves fans, but football fans in general, is a different debate and a big, pretty out of order, or definitely out of order and a big problem. Right, any other business, Pete, before we depart?
I was going to ask you what your thoughts are on since there's just two of us, on the general fixtures over the weekend. Is there anything else you're looking out for? Are you not bothered about Sheffield United or whatever at this point? But that seems like another interesting game, the Brentford one.
Yeah, I think Brentford is interesting if Sheffield United go there and chip away and get a point or anything. Brentford's fixtures are really interesting. Sheffield, the next three games: Sheffield United at home, Luton away, Everton away. I mean, if those go wrong for them, I think they're right in bother. Crystal Palace have got Liverpool away, which I think they'll lose, obviously. Then they've got two home games in a week, and if that goes wrong, they're in it. But I don't think they're in it yet, personally. I'm still looking at Everton. Like I said at the top, if we win and Everton lose, and then when we go to Everton, and then they've got Liverpool at home, they'll be right in the mix. They've got a pretty decent run-in, to be fair. But I saw a thing, Pete, where these supercomputers do the odds of relegation. Yeah. And they had Luton at like 66% or something, and we were 30 odd. Everton were 2% to go down, which I found mental. Any take on that?
I think I saw the same one. I think that was before the points deduction. Okay. So I guess that may have made a small impact, although that deduction was less than I'd been expecting, and perhaps others had been as well. So I don't know how much of an impact that will have made in the end. Yeah, I mean, it seemed a bit mad to me, to be honest. But then, I just think points on the board at this stage are just really important, aren't they? Because it wouldn't be a massive surprise if there just weren't many more put up there, to be honest. Yeah. And I guess that's what they're pricing in at this point. We've talked a lot of times, haven't we, about the sort of run of form that all of those teams have been on since January or whatever it is, and it's pretty pathetic. So it'd be a surprise to see people pulling a number of wins out of their pockets at this stage, I guess.
Yeah, and also like the goal difference factor as well is, if I said this earlier, but if Man City put a couple of goals on Luton, not even like 3 or 4, just a couple more, and we win, that'd be like at least 7 goal difference in our favour. I mean, that's an extra point. So 4 points if we win effectively is a big gap. So that's why I feel like this weekend is so important. I don't know if you saw this one as well. TC points out that tweet with the AI predicting we'll win the Champions League in 2049 and 2064, amazingly. And also, I think Rangers are down to win the Champions League at some point. So, AI will be the downfall of us all with stuff like that, certainly.
Well, let's hope we make it till then. Mr. Marinakis will be hanging on his big seat to 2060, whatever it was, trying to see that one home.
Yeah, true. The only other thing I was going to say from me was, there's still TC Live Show if you fancy it. And also, if you haven't seen last night's podcast, it was done quite late just to scheduling, but it's really good with Seb Hutchinson, with just his take on the relegation battle and Forest and where they are. He's really good in terms of a neutral who watches a shed load of football, and not just Forest, but every team. So to get his perspective was good. And I think he was pretty confident we'll stay up if we do take care of our own business, basically. The big thing being that it's still in our hands. And I think this week, as I've said, will be pivotal. Right. I think we'll leave it there. Thanks for everyone's company. One last thing that I forgot to do. Oh, my God. Terrible. Thanks very much for our second sponsors for this advert, Home Move Estate Agents, run by Ben Sales, who's a Forest fan, who will be at the live show tonight as well. If you're looking to sell your home, you can see, or buy a new one, you can see the number there, 01158321321. And Ben's email is ben@homemoveea.co.uk. Link is in the description. And crucially, they are 5-star rated on Google. So I'm sure they won't let you down in any way, shape or form. Right, Pete, thank you very much.
Thank you. Absolute pleasure being back, and looking forward to tonight.
Yes, looking forward to it. Do come and say hello if you're at the Trent Navigation. 7 p.m. start. Lewis and Fletch up first, and then a little interval, and then a Q&A where Mikey and Temps will join the stage. And then we'll do more through the summer. I'm sure Pete will be on the stage in the Q&A for at least one of those. Right. Have a good day, everyone. We'll be back tomorrow with Ryan, the Wolves fan from the Wolves Report, with the Wolves preview, and then post-match on Saturday. So, yeah, have a good day, and we shall see you soon.